The land of Egypt, a place of ancient wonders and timeless beauty, a place of majestic pyramids and a powerful pharaoh whose rule was absolute and unchallenged. But for the Israelites, it was a land of suffering and relentless toil. They were once guests, invited by Joseph, a man of great influence who had saved Egypt from famine. But time had passed, and a new pharaoh arose, one who saw the Israelites not as guests, but as a growing threat to his power. Their numbers had grown significantly, and Pharaoh feared their strength and potential to rebel. He enslaved them, forcing them to build his cities, to toil under the scorching sun, day after day. Their cries for freedom went unanswered, their spirits crushed under the weight of relentless oppression. The Israelites cried out to their God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, seeking deliverance. They remembered his promises, the sacred covenant he had made with their forefathers, a promise of a land flowing with milk and honey. Hope, though faint, flickered in their hearts, a small flame that refused to be extinguished. Surely, they thought, God would not abandon them in their time of need, for he had always been faithful. Theirs was a story of resilience, of faith tested but not broken, a testament to their enduring spirit. They clung to the belief that one day, a deliverer would rise, a leader who would break the chains of slavery and lead them to the promised land, a land of freedom and prosperity. Little did they know that their deliverance would begin with a baby, born in the shadow of tyranny, a child destined for greatness, who would change their fate forever. Pharaoh grew increasingly fearful of the Israelites. Their presence in his kingdom was like a shadow that loomed larger each day. Their numbers continued to multiply despite the harsh conditions they faced. The more they were oppressed, the more they seemed to thrive, and this only fueled Pharaoh's anxiety. His fear morphed into paranoia, then into outright cruelty. He could not understand how these people, subjected to such suffering, could continue to grow in strength and number. He devised a plan as cold and heartless as the desert night. It was a scheme born out of desperation and a desire to maintain control. He summoned his midwives, the women tasked with assisting in births. These women were respected and trusted within the community. Pharaoh's voice echoed through the chamber, each word dripping with malice. His command was clear and terrifying. Every Hebrew boy that is born, he commanded, you shall cast into the river. The midwives were horrified. They could not believe the cruelty of the order. How could they, women who brought life into the world, be complicit in such a heinous act? The weight of Pharaoh's command pressed heavily on their hearts. They knew the God of the Israelites, a God of justice and mercy. They had faith that he would guide them in this dark time. They feared him more than they feared Pharaoh. Their reverence for the divine gave them the courage to defy the king. They disobeyed the king, finding ways to spare the baby boys, their hearts heavy with each secret act of defiance. Each saved life was a silent rebellion against tyranny. Pharaoh, enraged by their insubordination, demanded an explanation. His fury was palpable, and the midwives knew they were in grave danger. The midwives, with trembling hands and steady voices, explained that Hebrew women were not like Egyptian women. They gave birth quickly before the midwives could even arrive. Their explanation was both clever and brave. Their clever response appeased the king, but the threat to the newborn sons of Israel remained. The midwives knew their struggle was far from over, but they had won a small victory that day. In the midst of this terror, a child was born, a son, a Hebrew boy, his cries a fragile melody in a world determined to silence him. His birth was both a miracle and a curse, a beacon of light in a time of darkness. His mother, Jochebed, gazed upon him with a love that defied the darkness closing in around them. Her heart swelled with a fierce determination to protect him at all costs. She saw in him not just her son, but a glimmer of hope for her people. In his innocent eyes, she found the strength to face the impossible. For 3 long months, Jochebed hid her precious child. Each day was a battle against fear, each night a struggle to keep him safe. She shielded him from the prying eyes of Pharaoh's soldiers, her heart pounding with each creak of the floorboards, each rustle of the wind. The tension was unbearable, yet she persevered. But as he grew, so too did the risk of discovery. His cries became louder, his presence harder to conceal. The walls of their humble home felt like a prison, closing in, suffocating the very life she fought so desperately to protect. The weight of their situation pressed down on her, relentless and unforgiving. Jochebed knew she could not keep him hidden forever. The day would come when hiding would no longer be an option. Desperate times called for desperate measures. She had to think of a way to save him, even if it meant letting him go. She had to make a choice that tore at her motherly heart. The pain was almost unbearable, but her resolve was unshakable. She would entrust her son to the very river Pharaoh had marked for death, trusting in a power greater than her own to protect him. With a heavy heart and a prayer on her lips, she set him adrift, hoping against hope for a miracle. Jochebed carefully selected bulrushes, tall reeds that grew along the Nile's edge. With nimble fingers she wove them together, crafting a basket, a vessel of hope in a sea of despair. She sealed it with pitch, making it watertight, a tiny ark for her precious cargo. Inside she placed her son, his cries hushed, his tiny hand grasping at the air. She knew the risks, the dangers that lurked beneath the Nile's placid surface. Crocodiles, hippos, the unforgiving current itself, any of these could spell disaster. But she clung to a sliver of faith, a belief that somehow her son would be spared. This was no ordinary child. Jochebed sensed it in her heart. This was a child destined for greatness. She kissed his forehead, her tears mingling with the waters of the Nile as she gently placed the basket among the reeds, her heart a storm of conflicting emotions. Section 5. Floating to Freedom, a journey on the Nile. The current, like a silent hand, carried the basket downstream. Jochebed watched from afar, her heart in her throat, her eyes never leaving the tiny vessel that held her world. Her daughter Miriam stood beside her, a young girl witnessing an act of both desperation and unwavering faith. The sun beat down on the water, reflecting off its surface. Birds sang in the trees, their cheerful melodies a stark contrast to the silent plea rising from Jochebed's heart. She prayed. She prayed for a miracle, for her son's protection, for a future she dared not dream of but clung to with all her might. The basket drifted closer to the palace grounds, to the very heart of the enemy's territory. Jochebed held her breath, fear and hope battling within her. Would her plan succeed, or would her son meet a cruel fate at the hands of those who sought to destroy him? Pharaoh's daughter intervenes. Pharaoh's daughter, her entourage trailing behind her, approached the riverbank. The heat of the day called for a refreshing dip in the cool waters of the Nile. As she neared the water's edge, her gaze fell upon the basket nestled among the reeds. She beckoned to her handmaidens, curiosity piqued by the unusual sight. They carefully retrieved the basket, its woven surface still damp from the river. As they peeled back the layers of bulrushes, a sound pierced the air, the faint cries of a baby, a sound both heart-wrenching and strangely compelling. Pharaoh's daughter peered inside, her heart melting at the sight of the infant. He was no ordinary child. Even in his helplessness, there was a certain nobility about him, a spark in his eyes that hinted at a destiny far beyond the ordinary. Section 7. A Mother's Reunion, an Unexpected Twist. Miriam, watching from a distance, saw her opportunity. She approached the princess, her young voice trembling but her words filled with courage. "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee?" she asked. Pharaoh's daughter, touched by the girl's compassion, readily agreed. Miriam raced back to her mother, her heart pounding with excitement and relief. Jochebed, her heart overflowing with gratitude, followed her daughter back to the princess, her steps light, her spirit soaring. Pharaoh's daughter, unaware that the woman before her was the child's own mother, offered to pay her to nurse the baby. Jochebed accepted, a bittersweet joy flooding her soul. She would raise her son, nurture him, and instill in him the faith of his ancestors, right under the very nose of Pharaoh himself. Section 8. Destiny's Child. Raised in Pharaoh's house. And so, Moses, for that was the name Pharaoh's daughter gave him, meaning drawn out of the water, grew up in the lap of luxury. He was surrounded by the finest things Egypt had to offer, educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Yet he never forgot his true heritage. His mother saw to that. She told him stories of his ancestors, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. She spoke of the God of Israel, the one true God, who had delivered his people from slavery before and would surely do so again. She planted seeds of faith and justice in his young heart, seeds that would one day blossom into a powerful force for change. Moses' life was a paradox, a delicate balancing act between two worlds. He was a prince of Egypt, yet a son of Israel. He was raised in a palace, yet his heart yearned for the freedom of his people. The stage is set. Moses' survival was nothing short of a miracle. a testament to the power of faith and the lengths a mother would go to protect her child. His rescue by Pharaoh's daughter placed him in a unique position, one that would have been impossible to foresee. He was a bridge between two worlds, a man caught between two destinies. The stage was set for a confrontation, a clash between oppression and freedom, between the gods of Egypt and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And at the center of it all stood Moses, the child who had been plucked from the Nile's embrace, the deliverer who would lead his people to the promised land. The story of Moses' birth is a story of hope and resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, a single spark of faith can ignite a fire that will change the world. It is a story that continues to inspire, to challenge, and to remind us that with God, all things are possible.